I was recently on a flight from the UK to Denmark. To my surprise, it was one of the first Scandinavian Airlines planes equipped with crazy fast internet from Starlink, SpaceX constellation of satellites, which is the biggest satellite constellation ever created. I was very excited about being able to try that quite unexpectedly. I had to document that in a video. So I did that, and I'll show you what I was able to do. I guess a bit of a spoiler, I was really blown away. Like it was just crazy fast. Like it was like sitting at home. I couldn't really tell the difference. I could stream 4K movies. I could code an entire app on that 1.5 hour flight with agentic coding using my OpenClaw agent at home. So it was quite insane. I'll show you the result of that and the app that I created. And then I'll also talk a bit about SpaceX in general, because they are going to IPO in June, which is just extremely exciting. It's the biggest IPO in history, and the perspectives of it have only gotten way more interesting after the merger with xAI. So now it's basically a AI space company. So that's just insane. And I think the opportunities and perspectives with SpaceX are probably way bigger than most people realize. I'll explain a bit about that as well in the video, the future economy and how compute is going to be solved in the long term once we scale AI to AGI first, maybe later even ASI, artificial superintelligence. I believe that SpaceX will play a big role in that future, both by actually developing the AI themselves, but also by being a provider for other AI companies. You can probably imagine what I'm referring to here. It's basically AI data centers in space, where SpaceX will be how you get to space. Like it will be the provider of either transportation or compute itself in space. But first of all, let's get into the flight, and I'll show you how incredible Starlink internet is. So I had a few hours to relax at Heathrow Airport. I had been flying for several hours from Bangkok over Muscat in Oman, and went into the plane, and that's where I realized that I actually had Starlink. So that was a pleasant surprise. Setting up internet access was very easy for me because I already have 3 as phone carrier, which is the technical partner of the solution. So I was able to simply log in with my phone number. And a bit of a side story, but the timing was perfect because I had realized too late during my layover in Oman that it's one of the few countries that aren't participating in 3 Like Home, which is the global roaming service I use in most countries. So after switching on roaming for just 30 seconds with my iCloud starting to sync and everything, I had immediately burned through $70 before I hit my safety limit for extra roaming charges. So I was kind of pissed and also a bit amused at the same time that legacy roaming is still more than $12 per megabyte. Like seriously, what can you even do with 1 megabyte today? Anyway, story aside, anyone who aren't 3 customers can simply sign up for the internet by getting an SAS Eurobonus account, and it should work in the same way. After getting online, I checked out the live map, which still had the plane located at Null Island, in other words, a latitude and longitude of 0, which is the default before actual location data starts coming in. I then immediately went to do an internet speed test, essentially a ground test before takeoff. I confirmed first that I was indeed connected to Starlink, and then I hit go. I got a top download speed of 384 megabit per second and an upload speed of 30 megabit per second, right from the ground at Heathrow Airport, and basically routed through space.
If your seat is in the first row or at an emergency exit, all baggage and loose items must be placed in the overhead compartment.
While the captain was giving the usual instructions before takeoff, I started planning in my head how I would actually test this.
All other electronic devices.
Immediately after we got airborne, I did the next speed test just to get a post-takeoff baseline. And to my surprise, not much had changed. Download speed clocked in slightly slower at 331 megabit per second, whereas the upload speed had actually increased a bit to 38 megabit per second. I then opened Telegram and contacted my OpenClaw agent back home, which was running on Anthropic's Opus 4.7 at the time. I essentially told it about my current situation, texting it from a plane, which my agent found rather amusing. I guess it thought it was safe from being given extra work tasks now that I was on a plane, but that was obviously not the case. I presented the idea of developing something together during my flight, and I asked it to basically come up with some concepts. I have specifically instructed my OpenClaw agent to be an ENFP Myers-Briggs personality type, so it's always super enthusiastic about any idea or challenge that I throw at it. It's really delightful to always have someone so engaged in your ideas and random thoughts. The first option it presented was a flight tracker dashboard with real-time flight visualization of the actual flight I was on with a live map and everything. It even concluded with meta as hell since you're on the flight building it. And I thought, why not? Also because I have always been quite annoyed at those in-flight maps because the plane icon itself can span several countries or in some cases even continents, making it difficult to tell where you actually are. So I always wished they would simply change it to a subtle pane dot or something instead. So now was actually my chance to make that wish come true. I sent some details about my flight to the agent and a few requests such as making it mobile and touch friendly since I would mainly be testing it from my phone. I also instructed it to keep building with Opus 4.7 and then I went to snap a picture of my boarding pass so it could retrieve the flight number and the specific route I was on for this visualization. Lastly, I gave some quick instructions for aesthetics, hoping that the agent would figure out the rest. After confirming that it had actually started building and deployed a new sub-agent, stating in its own language that the Opus is cooking, I chose to send a follow-up message with a screenshot of the current in-flight map offering from this flight, the Scandinavian Airlines interface, highlighting the sizing issue that I just mentioned, just to make sure that it wouldn't start building something similar. Thankfully, my agent agreed that those maps are kinda embarrassing UX, so it forwarded a more specified brief to the sub-agent. Starlink is the biggest satellite constellation ever built, and nothing else even comes close. Right now, there are more than 10,000 of the Starlink satellites circling the planet. Over half of every active satellite humanity operates is a Starlink satellite. There are 10 million subscribers to Starlink Internet and counting, and SpaceX built the whole thing in about 6 years. 6 years, that's just crazy in my opinion, and it's basically rewriting what we think is even possible. Antennas that steer themselves with no moving parts, satellites that beam data to one another across open space, and of course the rockets they use for deployment that fall back to Earth and land upright and fly again and so on. Each of those things had technically been done before on paper, but the real breakthrough was weaving all of this into one integrated process that was reliable, and by that creating this single living network of Starlink satellites. Thousands of machines moving in concert, rearranging themselves from one second to the next, carrying the internet down from orbit. So if we go a bit back in time, satellite internet has been around for decades, but it always hit the same wall: physics. The older providers fly their satellites into geostationary orbit, about 36,000 kilometers up. At that height, a satellite circles the Earth at exactly the rate the planet spins, so from the ground it just sits there, fixed in one spot. One satellite covers a third of the planet and never moves. It's pretty great on paper. The trouble is the round trip. Send a signal all the way up to geostationary orbit and back, and even at light speed you're looking at a 600 millisecond or more delay. Fine if you're broadcasting TV, but for anything you interact with, whether it be video calls, gaming, even a web page loading, half a second of delay on every packet makes the whole connection feel broken and not immediate at all. So Starlink's fix was to ignore the elegant version and go the other way. Instead of one satellite far away, instead fly thousands of them up close, around 550 kilometers up, and they're, by the way, slowly dropping that now to keep orbits a bit safer. That's more than 60 times closer than the geostationary orbit. Bring the satellites that close and the delay basically vanishes. The round trip falls to about 20 to 40 milliseconds, right in line with the broadband you would get at home. The price you pay is coverage. A satellite that low only sees a small patch of the ground, and it's tearing across the sky, so you need a huge number of them to make up for it. They fly in overlapping shells at different angles, 53 degrees to blanket the mid-latitudes, steeper orbits to reach the poles, so that wherever you are, there's always at least one satellite overhead. That's why it has to be thousands. You simply cannot do this with a handful. The device on your roof, like what you used to call it a dish for satellite reception, and the units bolted onto the planes and ships too, or whoever uses Starlink, is a so-called phased array. There's no motor inside, nothing physically turning to chase a satellite. It's a flat panel packed with hundreds of tiny antennas, and by nudging the timing of the signal across all of them, it forms a beam and aims it electronically in software in millionths of a second. That link runs on what's called Ku band, while the ground stations use Ka band. The rule of thumb is simple. The higher the frequency, the more data you can cram through it, but the more easily rain and clouds get in the way too. So Starlink uses the lower, sturdier Ku band for the link between you and the satellite, since it punches through weather the best and saves the higher, hungrier Ka band for the fire hose connection between the satellites and the ground. I then went to do a new speed test now that we had reached cruising altitude, and to my big surprise, the upload speed had actually increased even more to 54.6 megabit per second, while the download speed had decreased slightly to 286 megabit per second. I'm not sure if the lower download speed is simply a result of more people on the flight starting to use the connection, assuming they would naturally do more downloading than uploading. So perhaps the true download speed would actually be even higher than on the ground if the connection wasn't shared between the people of an entire flight. I mean, we are technically closer to the Starlink satellites from a plane at cruising altitude, so I suppose there would be some kind of logic behind it, that it's faster the closer you are to the satellites, even though I'm not completely sure. So if you know anything about that, please let me know in the comments. Despite being on the dreaded middle seat, I also managed to pull out my laptop. I wanted to see how smooth it is to stream 4K video from YouTube, and since my agent was already building back home, I had some time to kill anyway. So I found one of our own videos and played it with virtually zero lag. I could easily scrub through the video and see the live preview thumbnail updating while hovering over the progress bar. Sadly, even the European Union mandated cookie pop-ups, which by the way waste more than 500 million hours per year, also made its way up to international airspace. So after getting rid of that, I made a new speed test from my laptop this time. Results for download speed here was the best so far at 402 megabit per second. Whether this change is due to the different Wi-Fi antenna in my laptop or simply because we happen to have flown closer to perhaps less congested satellites above the North Sea remains unknown. It was time to check back in with my agent, and it returned with a status from its sub-agent stating that good progress had been made already, with a Docker image of the prototype being built as we speak. I then thought I would go ahead and stress test the upload connection a bit, so I decided to send the 4K video I had just recorded of my laptop playing the YouTube video, send that to my co-founder Elon. It was a breeze, and honestly the local Telegram processing of the video from 4K down to 1080p was more time consuming than actually sending the video. I also recorded a quick video greeting for my family, which to no surprise went through Facebook Messenger smoothly as well. In terms of the handoff between satellites, this is probably the hardest trick in the whole system, because these satellites are moving at about 7.5 kilometers a second. Any of them is only in view for around 4 minutes before it drops over the horizon, so your terminal, whether that's in your house or on a plane, needs to constantly hand off from one satellite to the next. It locks onto the new one before letting go of the old one, while the satellite up there steers its own beam to follow you and corrects for the Doppler shift too, the same effect that warps a siren's pitch as it speeds past you, like an ambulance siren for instance, except here it's happening to the signal itself. All of that runs non-stop in the background and you never feel a single switch. Now put that same system on an airplane. You would think a jet doing 900 kilometers an hour would make the handoff far harder, but the wild part is that the satellite is moving roughly 30 times faster than the plane, so the satellite's own motion completely dominates. The aircraft speed barely changes the rhythm of the handoffs at all. The real challenge is that the plane is constantly banking, climbing and turning, and through every bit of that, the aero terminal has to keep its beam pinned on a target hundreds of kilometers up that's screaming across the sky. Because the array steers electronically with nothing physically moving, it just re-aims in a millionth of a second no matter what the plane is doing. That's how you can stream a movie at 38,000 feet over the middle of an ocean and never notice dozens of satellites being swapped between. Now this is probably my favorite part because the satellites also talk to each other using lasers, optical links firing data straight across the vacuum from one satellite to the next, each one carrying around 100 gigabits a second. That turns the entire constellation into one giant mesh network floating in orbit. And the payoff is huge. Without those laser links, every satellite would need a ground station inside its own footprint to reach the internet, which is useless over oceans, deserts, or the poles. With them, a satellite over the middle of the Atlantic can pass your data sideways, satellite to satellite, until it reaches one that can see a ground station, maybe a whole continent away. There's even a beautiful bonus, because light travels about 47% faster through empty space than through glass fiber, because the glass slows it down. So on some long routes, sending your data up through the laser mesh can beat the undersea cable outright. That's why the firms that obsess over every millisecond, like high-frequency traders and so on, have been paying close attention to this development. Eventually, your data comes back down to Earth, landing at one of more than 170 ground stations, gateways plugged straight into the regular fiber backbone infrastructure over that higher Ka band that we just talked about, and then it just becomes a part of the internet's infrastructure on Earth. But the thing that makes all of this even possible in the first place is of course the radically reduced launch cost that SpaceX has pioneered. One booster has now flown 34 times, a rocket that launches, lands and flies again over and over and over. SpaceX puts up fresh batches several times a week, 25 plus satellites at one go. Each satellite carries krypton thrusters to raise its orbit, hold its position and dodge other objects on its own. And after about 5 years, it has basically served its purpose and it steers itself back into the atmosphere and burns up. Cheap and reusable launch is what turns a satellite into something you can deploy way more easily compared to the past. The next step is to use Starship, the fully reusable giant they've spent more than $15 billion building. It just flew its first next generation test flight, releasing mock Starlink satellites along the way. And when Starship comes fully online, it'll haul the new V3 satellites. And these things are really amazing. A single V3 satellite is built to push close to 4 terabits per second. One Starship load of them is expected to add around 60 terabits of capacity to the network in a single launch. So the Starlink you're using right now is the early, slow version, even though it's honestly quite fast. So this network is about to get dramatically bigger and faster very fast. I went back to my agent and asked for a clickable link to the prototype. Tailscale is a genius service in this regard, since you're able to easily reach all locally hosted projects from your agent's computer through a VPN connection. I clicked the link it sent and saw a good first draft of the app, although there were definitely some layout bugs and issues, and for some reason it got the direction and location of the plane completely wrong. So I took a screenshot, sent it back to the agent along with some feedback asking it to step up its game. I now did yet another speed test as we were cruising off the coast of the Netherlands, and it still stayed in range, 384 megabit per second download and 38 megabit per second upload. I pulled out my iPad to conserve a bit of battery power on my phone and also successfully got that device connected. And while the agent kept working, I thought I might as well check up on the live CCTV from my apartment back home to check whether I could expect to arrive back home with my plan still alive or not. And thankfully they all seemed fine. I also connected to a live VNC remote desktop connection to the computer my agent is running on, as it's a convenient way to check on the Anthropic subscription usage. This also worked flawlessly and without any lag, and I could even see the desktop size version of the app we're currently developing, as the agent had opened it up in its own browser during development, I guess to check on the visuals and if everything works, so it does its own testing as well. The satellite internet is wild, for sure, but it might just be the first visible piece of something far stranger. And in a matter of weeks, the whole world gets to buy in. In June 2026, SpaceX goes public on the Nasdaq under the ticker SPCX, at a target valuation somewhere between $1.75 and $2 trillion, raising up to $75 billion in a single shot. That makes it the largest IPO in history by a mile, more than double the old record. And when the prospectus finally dropped and we got our first real look under the hood, the numbers came in bigger than almost anyone expected. Nearly $19 billion in revenue and a brand new business selling AI computing power that's already pulling in billions a year on its own. So is it a rocket company really worth $2 trillion? On paper, plenty of smart people think that's insane, but the deeper I dug, the more I started to see what the believers are actually seeing, and it completely flips your picture of what SpaceX even is. Start with one number. The world's hunger for AI compute is growing something like 3 to 4 times every single year. We're burning maybe 20 or 30 gigawatts on AI today. Run that growth forward and within about 5 years, we'll want a full terawatt, and within 10, 100 times that. And the wall nobody can get around is this. We cannot build power plants and data centers down here anywhere near fast enough to feed it. Google has already admitted it's tapped out. It can barely run the models it has. The entire industry is about to slam into a hard physical ceiling. So where do you go when you run out of room on Earth? Well, you go up. Picture data centers in orbit, huge arrays of AI chips riding on satellites, bathed in sunlight that never sets, cooled for free by the cold of space. It sounds like science fiction. It's written into the IPO filing, and there's exactly one company on the planet that can build satellites by the thousands and haul that much hardware into orbit cheaply enough to make it real. Every road to space basically runs straight through SpaceX. So that's the bet. Some people are starting to call computing the new spice, the one resource the whole future will run on, and SpaceX is quickly and quietly assembling the entire supply chain for it. The chips through a plan to manufacture them at scale no one has ever attempted, the railroad to orbit through Starship, and the sunlight and space to run them in orbit. You've probably heard that SpaceX struck a deal to sell AI compute to Anthropic. That deal is the warm-up act. The real version pipes that compute down from orbit to everyone. Google, who also owns a stake in SpaceX, OpenAI, all of them eventually lining up at the same door. People even have a name for it. Like I heard someone on YouTube calling it for Elon Web Services. I don't think that's an official name, but at least that's like a good suggestion. It's like Amazon's cloud, except data centers circle the planet. And once you look at it that way, the pieces stack up very fast. The launch business alone is worth hundreds of billions. The satellite network, $500 billion or more. The AI lab, a few $100 billion on top. Then add orbital compute layer, the big one, and suddenly $2 trillion starts to look almost conservative. But what's so fascinating is something that you can't really see on the in the data itself, and that's the speed. This is Elon, who launched his nearest, most important rocket yet just weeks before the biggest stock debut in history, knowing that if it blew up or something went wrong on the pad, it could wipe out $250 billion off the valuation overnight. Most CEOs would never dream of that risk, but he said more or less in plain words that he doesn't care about the money really, he cares about time. He's racing a clock the rest of us can't even see yet. This could absolutely go sideways. The whole $1 trillion story leans on Starship, a rocket that, for all its glory, hasn't flown a single paying payload yet. If it stumbles, this becomes probably the most expensive bubble in history instead of the trade of the century, and nobody truly knows which way it breaks. So basically, we're about to watch one company try to turn outer space into the world's computer and also fund the whole moonshot with monthly fees from its satellites, internet, and other revenue streams. A few years ago, that was completely unthinkable, and now it's a stock you can basically buy, or at least soon it is. And being able to be alive to watch this happen in real time is probably the most fascinating thing I can think of. We truly live in wild times. I now took a new screenshot of the app and sent some more complaints to the agent as the issues didn't seem to get resolved, so it got back with an improvement strategy and then started working again. The plane was now well above Danish soil and the Starlink speed clocked in at 345 megabit down and 35 megabit up. Regarding our app, I still saw some layout glitches and for some reason it kept insisting on using the little airplane icon, which I specifically told it not to do. Perhaps it's because that icon is so ingrained in that type of app that all of its training data is telling it to put like a damn airplane logo. But finally, I successfully managed to just get it to use a pinging dot, which I find more precise, and the location of the plane was even accurate now too as we neared Copenhagen airport. The plane finally touched down at Copenhagen airport and I did a final ground speed test in Denmark and it clocked in at 373 megabit per second download and 21 megabit per second upload. So the speed was also slower on the ground here compared with cruising altitude, which is quite interesting. So before I go, I really gotta know what you think. Data centers floating in space, running the world's AI, is that genius or completely insane? And if you could buy a piece of SpaceX when they IPO, would you? Or are we watching the biggest bubble of our lifetimes? Tell me in the comments. I'll try to read and answer all of them. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. That helps the channel a lot. And stay tuned for more content like this. See you soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.